There has been many requests for new series to talk about on Death Battle for quite some time, but there is one series that has been making its way around the Versus scene for a while, and especially now, it is very highly requested. The classic Stickman series made by the creator Alan Becker, Animator vs. Animations. This series is very good, and honestly one of the best YouTube animation series of all time in my opinion. Because he's able to use characters as simple as stickman designs, but even with that simple looking character design, it has so much passion, life, and emotion behind it. From many different moments, like some of the best action scenes, some absolutely hilarious, or some that are very heartfelt or even tragic. But overall, it makes sense why this series is very highly requested for Death Battle. Not only is it a great series, but part of its whole thing is that there is a lot of fighting in it. And I've actually talked about this series in Versus before, well, not in a direct analysis video like this one, but I have talked about how much I do want to see this series on Death Battle before. Back in my top 10 most wanted Death Battles video that is very outdated and not entirely accurate to what I think now, but I still do want to see the series on it, with there being a matchup that is in my top 5, if not my top 3. Obviously that being Henry Stickman versus the Second Coming. But that's not what we're here to talk today, because while the Second Coming is obviously probably the most popular character from the series that has been requested on Death Battle, there are a decent amount of other characters that have been requested also, with the character I believe being the second most requested, at least from what I've seen, being known as King Orange, from the Animation vs. Minecraft series. And while this series is kind of a side thing to the main Animator vs. Animations part of the Alan Becker channel, I would argue it is just as important. And King Orange is one of the characters that made the series stand out a lot more in my opinion, and kind of made it more than just that side series. And he's one of my favorite characters from that entire series. At first, all we see of him is him being a conqueror of the Nether, but we get a little bit more information on him as the series goes along, and why he is doing the things he did. And I think he's a overall really well made character, and there's been quite a few requests for him for Death Battles as a whole. Heck, Death Battle has even talked about one of his matchups on a Death Battle cast. However, I'm not gonna lie, none of these matchups that I've seen talked about for him are even close to my favorite. Obviously, I don't hate any of these matchups, but there's always been one matchup that has stood out to me in particular. And it's funny that I think that because I've never seen anyone talk about this matchup. Not on YouTube, not anywhere else, not even a basic thumbnail. And obviously, if you couldn't tell by the title of this video, this matchup is King Orange vs. Junko from the Touhou project. Now, again, since this matchup isn't very known as far as I'm aware, I'm going to explain this matchup a little more in depth than I usually do for most other ones I talk about, because I do think this one deserves it. Because these two are very similar characters, like almost the exact same idea. Obviously some differences in there, but let me just explain. Both of these characters were originally relatively normal people, at least within the ideas of their series, and they were even parents with sons that they really loved. Until eventually those sons were killed, both of them gained immense hatred of anything that had to do with what they believed were responsible for their son's death. Rather, if they were directly responsible or indirectly responsible, their revenge was against all of it. And they wanted to wipe it out entirely, with both of these characters becoming some of the biggest bads of their entire series, and some of the most powerful threats the main characters have ever faced. Both of these characters also have some type of association with Hell or the Underworld, like places like the Nether, and Junko's association with the goddess of the Underworld herself, Hecatia Lapis Lazuli. and the Underworld fairies, with both characters actually getting fairly close to ending up achieving their goal, and didn't lose because they were completely outmatched by other characters in the end, but mostly by their own free will, not going fully through with what they did, and even found future relationships that somewhat improved them as beings. As you can see, this matchup has a lot of connections in general, and I think people miss over this one. But I am here to give my take on this matchup, because as I said, this is personally my favorite matchup for King Orange, and honestly one of my most wanted episodes of Death Battle of all time. Is part of that reason because I feel like it's a more unique matchup that I came up with, and feel more personally connected to it because of that? Well, yes, but it's not entirely for that reason. Because again, there is quite a lot to talk about with these characters, and there are respective differences in their personalities that make this fight rather interesting, along with all of those connections. Plus the fact they just have really a lot to talk about in terms of their abilities and overall worlds. And I really just want to see both of these series talked about on Death Battle, and I think this matchup does deserve more attention. But today, we are going to figure out if these two characters were to ever actually fight, who would win in the end of the day. So without further ado, let's finally take a look at our characters and see what they bring to the table. Let's take a look at King Orange first. As we've stated before, he started out as a normal stick figure, although admittedly he lived somewhere else instead of being part of a traditional game like the main group of stick figures, so he was a naturally born stick figure, however that works. Anyways, he lived in the town with his son that he loved very much, but ultimately lost his son to something his son loved a lot. That being the game Minecraft, and ever since that day he swore revenge against the entire game. But in order to do so, he must have been very impressive. And well, this character absolutely is. Because even before he became a villain, he was already pretty associated to fighting, and likely was pretty well versed in it based on the fact that him and his son seemed to like play fighting a lot, and was pretty clear that even a base King Orange seems to be able to outmaneuver other stick figures who have quite a decent amount of fighting experience themselves. But most impressively of all is what he is capable of with this experience. Because while King Orange himself doesn't have very many abilities on his own, but a creation of his called the Perfective Staff really does. With this staff being able to contain Minecraft blocks, and while this might not sound too impressive at first, but you can do a lot with this staff, because each block seems to have their own respective abilities, not just from what we've seen from him using, but also from other characters using similar staffs throughout the series, like how gold blocks can turn into fast melee weapons strong enough to break through obsidian, or how he can turn redstones into lasers, or a block of netherite that can boost an attack even more, sacrificing speed, and TNT blocks that can fire out explosions. And honestly, he can do much more with many other block varieties, but some of his more important ones are including the command block staff. His original, most preferred one, with this thing being able to enter in commands in Minecraft without actually having to type anything, with these things being able to summon items, keep enemies in place, slowing down enemies, inflicting them with all sorts of stats conditions, creating defensive blocks, and creating barriers. And while we never see it, we can assume he can probably do more than just this, like inputting specific commands like /kill or stuff like that to automatically kill his opponent, although this is kind of assumption. But his most powerful and most important is the Minecraft icon. This staff is interesting because with it alone, a person can use creative mode, which basically makes a person able to fly, have complete protection from death, and being able to resist commands altogether and have priority over command block games. Plus the fact they can use any block throughout the entire game of Minecraft to form anything they want that is actually in Minecraft, and it is able to summon any existing mob in Minecraft. It's already quite powerful. But that's not where it ends, because there's one more variation of it, that being the fused icon. This is the final state where two Minecraft icons are fused together, causing the staff to not only get an increase in power, but also being able to straight up absorb anything in Minecraft, but also form a massive vortex that can theoretically absorb all of Minecraft, or at least the Minecraft server of Alan Becker's computer. But with all of these variations, how powerful exactly is he? Well, first of all, King Orange would obviously scale to much lower feats from other characters, like some other stick figures being able to break through walls and take hits from cars and trains. Stuff that would easily get into the wall to small building level ranges casually. Although this is obviously very low level stuff, so let's actually get into some of the more insane stuff. First of all, even the base Second Coming was able to lift an entire solar system, and theoretically create it, although this feat is a little hard to measure because it's hard to say how structures properly scale in the way he did, but for the sake of things, let's just assume this is a lower level's existence he's manipulating to create the solar system he did. And theoretically is able to cause more damage to the Second Coming than Euler's Number, a character who was hitting the Second Coming with basically infinity. And the same Second Coming was able to move and rotate Tipler's cylinder, a structure with infinite height, which should put these power levels into the high universal level ranges. Although the canonicity of the Versus Math series is a bit unknown and doesn't exactly fit very well with the other timelines of the series, and the fact that this did technically come after the Animation vs. Minecraft series, so we don't know for sure if King Orange fully scales to this. But we don't have to look at this alone just to get the idea of how powerful he actually is, because his best showcase of power actually comes from him directly, luckily, with his black hole with the fused icon staff. And with this power, he threatened to destroy everything within the respective Minecraft realm he was in, with there being several spaces and dimensions in this area, which would put him around the low multiversal levels of power, and arguably in the complex multiversal level ranges if we assume he would have threatened pretty much every Minecraft server. Although this is kind of an assumption, and really just that, a assumption. Because while he wanted to destroy Minecraft, we don't ever actually see him threaten anything other than Alan's own game. So it's not exactly super concrete, but it is a possible meta we can get to. There's even a way we could theoretically get this even higher, although I don't personally agree with it. But there is a theoretical argument which can scale the Second Coming, who can kind of compare to Euler's Number, which at the end was able to create a shape with infinite dimensions, which is theoretically high hyperversal. Although this feat doesn't really work that much, since first of all, it's not really an attack or anything that any character is shown to tank, since it doesn't do any damage and really only seems to be a portal opening ability that requires a decent bit of setup with a very particular symbol, and again, it's not really something that these characters have natural access to, other than Euler's Number technically having access to it. But even Euler's Number can't even take the damage of that type of an attack, since even weaker attacks earlier almost destroyed Euler's Number almost entirely. Which again, while we will count as canon for the sake of this, it still is a little bit questionable if it's usable or not here. So for the most part, I do believe he mostly caps around the low multiversal to maybe complex multiversal, with arguments of higher ranges, but you would really have to stretch that out to a kind of unrealistic measure. And in terms of speed, he would be faster than characters who are massively faster than light speeds that can intercept people from space. And he can get to infinite speed, scaling off of the Second Coming, comparing to Euler's Number again, which was able to turn an infinite distance into a finite distance. And the Second Coming being able to outrun a fourth dimensional object. But you can also technically argue some faster ranges, although again I don't really believe in these ideas, since when talking about Tipler's cylinder and moving back in time, but this isn't really a movement speed necessarily, so I would most likely say that King Orange is massively faster than light to infinite speeds, and I would believe this is the most consistent and arguable way of measuring him. And in terms of durability, he can actually take the power of his own staff directly, and comparing to other characters who can be hit head-on by it. And also, this staff is able to affect code to some extent, so it also gives him a bit more of a resistance. So his durability would match the attack potency of the staff itself. So yeah, as a whole, King Orange is definitely very powerful, and definitely deserves his title of king. But he's not the only character who got more powerful from their revenge. So let's take a look at a certain being of rage and purity. Now we get to Junko. Junko is a being of pure hatred. Being a sagacious spirit, or one made of pure purity, although she wasn't always that way. She actually had a son, even a husband, named Hou-Yi, the man who shot down the suns. But unfortunately, due to her husband's relations with other Lunarians, and particularly with one called Chang-A, and rather due to these relations or not, this led to her son's death by the hands of that said husband, with her wrath soon spreading from him to his wife Chang-A, to the Lunarian race in general, and on this quest she gained more and more power. But what is Junko really capable of? Well, looking at her abilities, she can fly, fire beams of light, and should have some pretty similar godlike regeneration based on the fact that even weaker characters can regenerate on the soul level. And based on the ridiculousness of how the Touhou series works and its yokai and some of the more powerful beings, as long as someone has some sort of belief, they should be able to regenerate back from pretty much anything. But her main ability is to purify anything. Now, this ability is a bit complicated, but I'll give you a basic rundown. Purifying someone in a vacuum is basically refining it. She can do this to objects like water or metals, or she can purify people, refining their personalities, mess with your emotions, and straight up just make you more powerful, or purify beings to the point where they are pure life forces, not only becoming more powerful, but also spreading impurity, according to the Lunarians. Or it could just kill you outright, since what this ability really is removing desired traits, which Junko can control at any given time how her purification actually works. Which is actually why she can outright ignore the rules of spell card duels, which are normally supposed to be unable to kill, but Junko can kill unconditionally regardless of the rules, making her truly one of the most threatening forces you can ever experience in the series. But how strong is Junko truly? Well, to figure this out, we need to figure out the complex nature of how the Touhou universe actually works, and how exactly far does Junko scale? Well, pretty high. In fact, she is probably one of the most powerful characters within the series, based on the fact that she can threaten the Lunarians, who were forced to leave under her siege of the moon, and some of those said Lunarians, who Yukari Yakumo, who is basically the one who maintains Gensokyo, which is its own straight-up cosmology in of itself, and Yukari can affect it and beyond, but as a whole, Yukari Yakumo states she wouldn't really be able to do much against the Lunarians as a whole. And while technically there are some arguments saying that Junko was only able to do this because of her fairy army she had, which isn't technically wrong because these fairies exploited a certain weakness of pure life force that threatened Lunarian purity, but Junko was really doing most of the work here, because the fairies got this power under her purification, which allowed them to become as powerful as they did under the lunar capital. And second of all, Junko was already threatening Lunarians as it was, which is impressive since most yokai can't even properly do anything to them at all. And again, she was more of a threat to them than Yukari Yakumo herself, who has actually fought in against the Lunarians before in a war before. But anyways, now with that, how powerful exactly is this? Well, again, we need to figure out how big the cosmology of the series actually is. And this is where things get, well, complicated, since a lot of it does seem to be based off of some interpretation. But there is some consistent values we can get here, because in the series there are 3 main layers, that being the ones where the humans live and abide by the laws of physics, sort of, the spiritual/mental layer that holds all emotions, and the memory layer, which basically is the collection of all events in the cosmology. Each of those are transcending each other, meaning at minimum the memory layer would be around 5D, which is around the low complex multiversal level ranges. Although this is actually kind of a low estimate for this, because it is stated that even the lowest layers of the series exist out of our traditional flow of space and time, which means the lowest layer is likely 4D. And then that's not even including the outer worlds of the series, or the statements of it having unified physics, or quantum worlds, or a whole bunch of other things that make this very complicated, but some imply infinite dimensional existences. Plus the fact that yokai actually transcend this in their true forms, meaning that Junko would scale even higher, based on the fact she's able to threaten the characters at the higher ends of this, and this would actually put her scaling at the relative low end of around complex multiversal, and that's not even including the string theories that can get them way higher with the infinite dimensions, getting them potentially into the high hyperversal to even beyond ranges. But again, this is just theory, and isn't necessarily complete fact, since again, this is a very interpretational series. Yeah, I know, that's kind of a lot to process there, but anyways, moving on, let's get into the speed of the characters in Touhou. Anyways, they should be casual light timers since they are constantly dodging light-based attacks in the series, and should naturally be in the infinite speed ranges due to the fact that, again, their cosmology would extend above the traditional layers of traditional time and space, and this would arguably get them into the inaccessible ranges, and this is kind of even more backed up that gods in Touhou, even the ones that aren't even that ridiculously powerful, can exist everywhere in nature in almost an omnipresent type of way, which would actually boost their speed even higher. So yeah, as a whole, Junko is ridiculously powerful, and somehow finds a way to stand out as one of the most threatening beings despite all the gods. It certainly shows that a mother's rage is sometimes the most terrifying thing of all. But can she truly take the title of queen from the king? Let's finally get to the fight itself. Finally, we can get to the matchup itself, and well, this is certainly an interesting one. There's kind of a lot to break down here, so let's go over each stat that don't really matter that much first, and try to narrow it down so we can get more of what really does matter. Starting off with experience and skill. This is relatively a non-factor, because while it is slightly relevant, it doesn't matter as much as later categories we will get to. And even then, it's kind of hard to say who fully has the advantage here. Junko has been around way longer, thousands of years in fact, but we don't really know how much time she's actually been training her abilities. King Orange, on the other hand, has a lot more on-screen combat experience shown, and is able to outdo characters that also have quite a bit of fighting experience themselves. So while you could technically argue both sides here, it's not exactly completely going to matter that much in the end, and you could kind of argue either way, as I said, so this is honestly going to be a draw. And similar thing kind of goes with intelligence, honestly. While it does play a factor in a fight like this, but it's not necessarily the most important thing here. Both of these characters are actually really smart, and while yes, rage does partly define them as characters, and it's a bit misguided at times, ultimately, when they're actually trying to achieve their goals, they are really threatening and know how to do it. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that they stopped trying that much at the end, they probably would have achieved their goals. Again, it's not entirely clear-cut on who has the advantage, and even if we did say one had the advantage, it wouldn't really be that big of a difference. So overall, again, we're going to call this one a draw as well. So ultimately, what this matchup comes down to are these factors: speed, abilities, resistances, and power. Starting off with speed, these two are relatively comparable, both being consistently faster than light characters, both of them have infinite speed measurements, and potentially arguable inaccessible speeds, although Junkos are quite a bit more easy to prove and a lot more consistent. Arguably, Junko's even faster than what we gave her earlier, and even if somehow these two were comparable in speed at similar levels, which again is kind of a stretch, but even if we were to say that, Junko would still scale higher in those ranges than what King Orange can provably get to, meaning she takes the edge here. But that changes when we get into abilities. This is interesting because this is kind of a case of quality versus quantity. But both of them obviously have very good abilities here, but King Orange theoretically has way more of them, with his Persected Staff just having way more because of the variety of blocks he uses, with the Minecraft block and the command block just allowing him to provably do a lot more. And even the command block actually having similar properties to Junko's Purification, although obviously not quite to the same extent. Because Junko can remove pretty much any aspect that she doesn't want, like, well, you being alive, and she's broken traditional rules with this purification before, meaning while it is probably a bit more impressive than the command block in general, I do think because King Orange not only having something similar to Junko's purification, but having more abilities with more powerful blocks than the command block, I believe overall the quantity is just a little bit too much here. So abilities goes to him. But does this matter when we look at their resistances? Because both of these can actually resist quite a lot of what each other can do. The questions are, can Junko's Purification do anything against creative mode, and would the commands or the Minecraft icon affect Junko? Well, this gets into some interesting stuff, so strap in. Starting with the first question, if Purification could work against creative mode, while it can theoretically, it's not guaranteed. We don't really know if Purification works against immortal beings in Touhou, and while it can technically remove any desired impurities, again, it's not entirely guaranteed. And creative mode is basically protecting you from death. In fact, there's just, again, outright a statement for that. And King Orange is a character who can survive for at least a time, having code being deleted from him, or at least to some extent, meaning it is possible that he could resist purification to some extent. And when we look at the other question, if King Orange can actually really affect Junko all that much here, well, surprisingly, not really. King Orange's Minecraft icon staff can absorb enemies and affect code to some extent, but there's a little bit of a caveat to this. The Minecraft icon only really works as well as it does against characters from Minecraft. And this isn't really just assuming either, based on the fact that Minecraft characters are instantly taken out and are the only characters that can actually be absorbed into the staff or fully affected by the black hole. Now, obviously, King Orange can hurt characters outside of the game. I'm not saying he can't, because obviously he can, but they don't work quite to the same extent that it does for other Minecraft characters. And obviously, Junko doesn't fall under the classification that Minecraft would. And while manipulating code of some characters is very powerful and definitely some type of version of existence erasure, Junko is a character who should be scaling similarly to what other characters that Yukari Yakumo can't even affect all too much, who can manipulate boundaries, which is to somewhat of a similar extent, and Junko should be stronger than the character Sagume, who was actively threatened by Junko, and Sagume is a character that can basically warp reality with her words. So yeah, even King Orange's black hole encoding manipulation isn't guaranteed to kill someone like Junko, especially since Junko's body is really only an avatar, theoretically, and destroying her wouldn't even destroy her completely because she can always just reform back, meaning that both of them can resist a lot of what the other can do, meaning that neither of them have a distinct advantage over the other here, so overall this category is a tie. So ultimately what it comes down to is our final category of power. And obviously this is a little complicated, but relatively clear-cut. Both of these characters get into the multiversal to complex multiversal ranges theoretically, which arguably puts them to a similar degree, but King Orange's is way harder to prove and takes a lot more assumption than Junko's does, since it relies on the fact that we are assuming Minecraft not only scales to what Minecraft in the games actually are, but also assuming he's affecting more than what Alan's Minecraft is, which is actually not something that is outright stated he's doing. While Junko directly compares to a big part of her cosmology, if not almost all of it, to quite a decent extent, which naturally gets her in a much easier range, again scaling off of Yukari. So in terms of consistency, she would have the better terms here. And while King Orange does have theoretically higher ends, all the way up into the high hyperversal ranges, so does Junko, and with the Touhou cosmology theoretically having infinite dimensional layers using the string theories, along with the fact that weaker characters than Junko exist outside of this and transcend that reality entirely, which would potentially put them into the outer versal ranges, meaning that even if we take these really kind of out there ideas for their scaling, Junko would still have the higher theoretical ends than what King Orange can actually reach to, even if we were to include some of this ridiculousness, despite its, well, kind of iffy idea of this actually scaling to them. And honestly, personally, I believe in the Touhou idea having the higher scaling than the other way around, but again, even using their highest interpretational ends, Junko would just be scaling higher. But let's just say, for the sake of things, that they are somehow equal in power. Well, Junko would still ultimately have the edge here, because again, her power comes from her naturally, while King Orange's power comes from his staff, something he can and has lost before, since even weaker characters have knocked it away from him before, and he has shown to struggle against characters who are at a similar power to him, like Herobrine, and the reason why he even ended up winning that fight was because Herobrine was specifically part of Minecraft and the staff directly countered him. But Junko, on the other hand, doesn't have this weakness at all, so even if King Orange can't technically die in creative mode, he can lose it, something Junko can definitely exploit. Plus the fact that the Minecraft icons can be separated, which is theoretically something Junko can do. So either way, Junko takes this final category and win. With one more quick thing I should mention is that while King Orange could theoretically go outside of the game or rewrite the script as some people would like to assume, but honestly I am more referring to how Liam talked about this character during the Death Battle cast for King Orange vs. Azrael, I'm gonna kind of say this. While this is something they could theoretically do, this is not a passive ability that the stick figures can use. First of all, they would have to actually exit the game, something that they are not able to do instantaneously, with them needing to usually have some type of output in order to get out of it. This is actually shown pretty consistently throughout the games. with them being stuck in games like Minecraft and the YouTube app and some other occasions. Let alone a character like King Orange, who doesn't do this nearly to the same extent that other stick figures do. And in order to do this, the Stickman would have to be, well, alive in order to actually accomplish this. Because once a Stickman is dead, they can't rewrite themselves back to life unless some force is bringing them back to life. Like with what the Second Coming's power did to the other stick figures when they were taken out by the Dark Lord. And we actually know for the fact that Stickmans can die permanently. We see this with King Orange's son. And he wasn't able to fix his death, so it's very unlikely he can just rewrite himself back to life. Especially with a character who actively does have the capacity to take him out. So while King Orange definitely has a lot of power and definitely earned his title that he has, and definitely deserves respect, Junko is ultimately the more vengeful force, which is evident by the fact that she didn't even give up on her goal completely, just postponing it. And in the end, the king would be purified under her wrath. She's just too powerful and too quick for this king, and he has been ultimately dethroned. So in my opinion, I personally believe Junko wins this more times than not. But what do you all think? I absolutely love this matchup, and I do think it's a bit interpretational on both ends, but I think this has a lot of potentially interesting interactions between their abilities and how they act towards other characters. And I think it's more than just their connections, even if that is quite a lot. And as a whole, I believe that this is the perfect matchup for both. Although a little bit tragic and a little sad if either of them died, if they were to lose in a death match, although that is not too dissimilar to some of other King Orange's matchups. But anyways, I would love to hear your guys' opinions on this one. Do you agree with me, or did I miss something that would ultimately give King Orange the win? Either way, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I would really like to hear your opinions on this matchup as a whole, since I do think it deserves a little bit more recognition. But yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.